walked all the way from Guatemala across Mexico by himself until he crossed the border alone, and then he met other immigrants and hitchhiked rides on a truck to Dallas and then to Postville. So we understood how desperate his family situation was. There were many in that same predicament. They were basically begging to be deported. Of course, what made this case unique was that for the first time, at least in this scale, they were not being deported, but actually criminally prosecuted and sent to jail for 5 months or more. And the fact that they did not have a right to bail, and that if they wanted to plead not guilty, they would have had to wait possibly longer, up to 6 or 8 months in jail without bail, waiting for a trial, made this situation very, very difficult to really say that, that there was justice done in many of these cases. Even though I can tell you individual cases, the truth of the matter, and I will, the truth of the matter is that they were all treated exactly the same, with the same plea agreement. There was no case-by-case review, no circumstances, individual circumstances reviewed. So basically, the innocent and the guilty were all bunched together.
You describe, Erik, you describe one man just weeping through it all. You say that he just said he was nobody. Yes.
This was the first interview, and it lasted 3 hours. For most of those 3 hours, this man was just weeping, and he was weeping for his family, worried about his children. He had children back in Guatemala, his mother, his wife, and his sister, all depending on him. He was the sole earner for the entire family. And one of the burdens of the interpreter is that in order to really be able to interpret accurately and convey the meaning and the spirit of the meaning that each person says, you really have to put yourself in their place. You have to become them, so to speak. And when I became this man, so I could interpret for him accurately, I was placed in the position that he was in. And I found it, quite frankly, to be an intolerable burden. Basically, I saw immediately that this man had no choice but to plead guilty if he wanted to return to his family as soon as possible, after 5 months in jail and then at least another month for deportation. So I could immediately see myself in that situation, and I realized that this man, just like many others, women as well, parents, would be placed in jail for these 5 months, and every waking hour they would be consumed by the worry as to whether their family was going to make it, as to whether any of their children was going to make it that day. And on top of that, they would have to carry the burden of having failed their families. So to me, that situation, which was, I think, could have been foreseen and should have been foreseen by authorities, because they are experienced in this, so they know, they must know, and it is their business to know, that many of these Guatemalan and Mexican people have families in their countries and children depending on them, as well as in Iowa, in the United States, in Postville in this case, such that to place them in that position, basically holding their families' well-being ransom over their heads in order to induce them to accept a plea agreement and plead guilty as the fastest way to get back home, and then placing them in jail for that time under that kind of duress. I think that it's very disturbing. It's very disturbing.
Professor Camayd, you took the unusual step of breaking a code of confidentiality among legal interpreters. You've been doing this interpreting for almost a quarter of a century. You're a professor of modern languages at Florida International University in Miami. Why did you do this?
Well, first of all, let me say that I'm a professor of interpreter ethics, so I knew exactly what I was doing and how, and to what extent I could speak out and so forth. I do not advocate for other interpreters to do this. I think I was in a unique position where I had the duty to do this as a citizen and also as an interpreter. Let me say that I did not break the code of confidentiality. The confidentiality clause in the Interpreter Code of Ethics is designed to prevent the interpreter from affecting the outcome of the case. Now, in this situation, the case was over May 23rd. The defendants had 10 days in which to appeal the sentence, and I didn't even begin writing my essay until the second week of June. So by that time, not only was the case over and these people in jail, but also the appeal period, the 10-day period for appeal had expired. So it was a closed case. So at that point, the confidentiality did not apply any longer. In addition to that, confidentiality is not absolute. There are other requirements, ethical requirements of the interpreter that override it many times. For instance, if you are a medical interpreter and you find out that a client has tuberculosis or another epidemic disease, and they tell you, please don't tell anybody because I'll be placed in quarantine and I won't be able to support my family. Well, you have a duty to report it because it's in the public interest, and that overrides confidentiality. In this case, there was also...
we have 5 seconds, Professor Camayd.
Okay. There was also the requirement for me to notify about any impediment in the legal process as an officer of the court. And that's why I did what I did.
Well, I want to thank you. I want to thank you very much for being with us, Professor Erik Camayd-Freixas. We will link to your report on what happened in Postville, Iowa. I'm Amy Goodman. Thanks for joining us.